Fantastic, thank you. Welcome everybody, and it's a really warm welcome this afternoon. If you don't know who I am, my name's Lauren Ovenden. I'm the Corporate Director for Education, and I can honestly say that it's an absolute delight to open this launch today. I promise you I won't talk for too long. Those of you who know me know that I can talk for England, but I will do my level best to keep it relatively short. I think it's just worthwhile to say a couple of things though, because I hope you know that within Waltham Forest there is a real commitment to work with all schools, settings and colleges, regardless of their designation, because we educate around 40,000 of our children and young people. So that is a significant number of children and young people that across the system we reach. And I think that's combined with an absolute commitment to face the climate emergency that we're all facing with a rigour and a recognition that action is needed now to secure the future for our children. And I'm delighted to say that this launch, I think, is a really positive statement about some of the work that we can do and genuinely take the work that we do around the climate emergency and the climate charter to a level that wouldn't happen if we didn't have that coordinated work and that sharing of best practice. So I think the ask of all of us is to ensure that there is meaningful action, that the Charter reflects both our internal commitment to you, but also reflects the engagement that I know you as system leaders will make to actively engage around this important initiative. I won't say too much more because I know we've got some fantastic speakers today, so I will hand back to Poppy and look forward to listening to the comments in the chat. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much, Lauren. Yeah, I think I'll start off by pointing out that I don't just have a random field background behind me, in case you were wondering. This is actually the sort of the meadow at the back of the Hive, formerly known as Suntrap Forest Centre, where we have our camping pods with a ground source underfloor heating for all weather residentials. So that's what's going on in the picture behind me. And yeah, welcome. Thanks ever so much for joining us today. I think it's actually the first day of COP27, we've probably all heard about on the news. And I personally, I've been involved in campaigning around COPs for quite a long time. I think I can't think of anything more positive than actually being here with people interested in education and localism in Waltham Forest, because I think this is where real change can be made and putting the future of our sort of young people, students, at the heart of what we do. I am going to share a little bit of sort of the charter and talk through it. I won't go through it page by page because, well, you can do that in your own time. And there is the link already in the chat. People do want to just be opening it and flicking through as we go. As I get that ready, feel free to sort of put questions in the chat as I talk through it, and we'll look at those in a moment. So yeah, I'm very proud to be launching the Waltham Forest's Schools and Colleges Climate Charter. We've been working on it for about 6 months, having meetings with different groups of people, both who students, schools, colleges, but also other organisations and different departments of the council, to make sure that this is sort of presenting a joined up picture of what's possible for climate action and education in the borough. And all the way, as you start working on it, we're really asking for people to feedback, ask us questions, make comments, because this is also going to be a work in progress as plans develop based on what we're presenting here. So the structure of it is around 8 themes as listed there, and that's sort of because we know schools are doing a lot of work already on things that will touch on these themes. We hope this is a way to bring it together in a way where you can actually start setting goals, milestones, ambitions that aren't something that you'll do this year and then you'll do the same again next year, but actually things that you see progression on through a plan. And we're within all those themes, we're talking about potential actions that those sort of 4 groups of people shown there can do: the learners, the teachers, senior leaders and governors, school business managers and estates teams. Because all those groups are going to be doing some positive work already, but it's a case of let's share between everybody what's going on and also make sure they're all seen as important within this longer term planning. Because what I've observed, a lot of the good work isn't necessarily known in other parts of the school, or doesn't have the oversight of governors, and therefore isn't given the sort of status really we think it deserves. We've been asked, why is curriculum one of the themes when it's not necessarily an element, it's not a thing that we need to sort of change per se, like looking at food or water. But we've recognised that actually from the climate leadership programme that Emily, my colleague on this call, runs, a lot of students were saying to us, well, we seem to learn the same thing about climate change every time we have like an extra someone coming in to do an activity, to learn about global warming, the basics of the science. They're really saying to us, but we don't know the details, we don't know what it means to us. It doesn't seem to sort of, there was a frustration that that learning wasn't being applied in a rigorous way, essentially, which is why we felt that having curriculum theme was really important to make sure that it isn't missed out of lessons and it isn't developed as a knowledge base like other subjects are. Within the charter document, this, we're also including like why is it needed, like some tips, and also just a bit of what we call climate literacy. So this isn't just for the eco leads or sustainability coordinators and people that are really interested in this. Hopefully this document is informative for all the teachers, tutors, broader school community, because it's got this sort of literacy information. Essentially, we want everybody to feel confident and understanding. If we're hearing about net zero on the news, what does that mean? So an important document, or sort of, well, toolkit, that's what it's called, attached to the charter is the climate action toolkit on the hub. I'm going to pop a link for that in the chat now. And this is, in a way, this is the bit that's the thing that's going to be the work in progress that will develop and evolve over time. And this really supports what's in the charter. There is all the three headings there, like senior leaders, business managers, teachers and learners. They link through then to a set of resources on the hub. And as someone was saying earlier, there's a governor, link lead, role description, for example. It's an example that the Waltham Forest Governor Services have taken on, but they're for schools to adapt to suit themselves. And it also includes a sort of a template that you can start creating your climate action plan in. But we'll be adding things, updating things as we go, and depending on how schools sort of, yeah, what feedback we get and how the planning process goes. So this diagram is just demonstrating the sort of steps of the charter. And what's most important here is that any school can sign up whatever they're already doing on sustainability and climate change. You don't have to already have those 1, 2, 3 steps in place. You don't already have to be winning green awards, but you might be winning green awards, and anyone can sign up kind of, and you're starting from where you're at now. And we want you to be working on those 3 steps are key, essentially having formalised role descriptions, having a student body that's able to sort of like feedback and understand the issues of the school, talk to the people who are actually making decisions in the school, and that everyone's contributing to a climate action plan. The icons around there represent the 8 themes. And we also really want to be celebrating, right from the beginning, we can be celebrating what you're already doing. We'd love you to be sharing activities, actions, initiatives taking place in your schools and colleges. And we will be sending out, when you sign up, there's a sort of survey which helps us understand what's already happening in your school or college. And we'll be sending that survey back to you, essentially, towards in the summer term. So using that as a baseline, that's then to help you sort of look at what's progressed, and it'll help us understand actually what's the survey, so what's the work on this charter helping you achieve in the school year. So we're presenting a kind of some key milestones, which hopefully people don't find too prescriptive, but give enough of a sort of a guideline and some stepping stones to get you moving. I know one school's already been looking at this and turned it into a spreadsheet, and they're going to be, I think they said even their students, their eco club, are looking at the big climate conversation, which also started today, and will be running, the students are going to run the big climate conversation with the other year groups to help decide on the topics and themes they're going to be focused at in term 2 and 3. So I mentioned these 8 themes. I won't go through each one, but this is just an example of what one page looks like, divided into suggestions for learners, teachers, etc.
So good.
And within each of those suggestions, again, hopefully they're just starting points for conversation. You might be like, well, we're never going to get a meat-free day in the staff room, but what could we do instead, for example? And there's a key with showing which might reduce your carbon footprint, which are going to be free, and where you get this toolkit symbol, that means there'll be a related resource on that toolkit that I mentioned earlier on the hub. Yeah, learning ideas and a little case study along with each of those 8 themes. So to wrap up, really we look forward to helping you putting this into action and helping you create your plan. I know the question that comes up time and time again is, we want to do this, but how do we pay for it? Sadly, the Hive doesn't have a big pot of money, but we do have myself and Emily working as climate action outreach coordinators, and it's part of our job to support schools in this planning. And we also run a half-termly teach meet, sort of networking, and that focuses on a different topic each half term. The upcoming one is actually next Wednesday at the William Morris Gallery, film screening and discussion of the utopian future, as opposed to dystopian, of which there are many, called 2040. So please sign up and come to that. But and we'll be doing some teacher CPD, hopefully up here at the Hive. So we're really here to support you in developing these plans and putting them into action. Stop talking there and take a few questions. I can see some things were popping up in the chat. Yes, the film's called 2040. Stop sharing. And we will also, I'll follow up tomorrow, emailing out those links and things again. There's a question of participation certificate for this session. We're planning to do something in the summer term for schools that are progressing through creating an action plan. Haven't quite decided what yet. Of course, as soon as you start talking about merchandise, you're then talking about stuff and what happens to that stuff and what's its carbon footprint. So we haven't quite decided what we're doing, but there wasn't an intention to have this session's certificate. Are there any other questions? Do pop a hand up. Got hi, Anne.
Hi. Is it possible to avoid duplication? Because we wanted to sign up for eco schools, and so then we've got this, and what I don't want to do is to have sort of like twice the amount of work, because I see that you've got 8 themes on yours and then eco schools has got something else. So is there a way that they can be twinned so that we can effectively do it all, but because there's literally me, and so I don't then want to be trying to do lessons, whatever, and be doing 2 different charters and action plans. I need it to be one. Is there a way that could get help with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. It's something we do actually put a line in the charter document, is that participating in eco schools should very much be something that you write into your action plan. We want it to be in your action plans, senior leaders and governors are acknowledging that it's really important for the school to do that, and it doesn't drop off when Anne gets too busy next year, for example. The idea of the themes is a way to help you look at them, what you're doing. So you might be like, well, actually our eco schools focus on these 3 things this year, so we know that we're doing some work on those that also relate to the action plan. But the action plan is something that your eco students might feed into, but really it's taking it to a more senior level, make sure there's oversight of how those pieces are fitting together. So your eco team might be doing a campaign about switching off the lights, but how is that working with a school business manager who's looking at actually energy use across the whole term, and how can they have a conversation with the students? Does that make sense? So it's really going a step beyond eco schools, but you want to make sure the eco schools is part of it and feeding into it.
Okay, I might email you.
I will happily come in and do a session, or speak to the governors as well about how we make sure that student work is really acknowledged, but it doesn't just stay with them.
Okay, thank you.
Some of the people working on eco schools. Debbie.
Hi Poppy. I was just wondering about so you were talking about finances and lack of finances, obviously, which we're all experiencing at the moment. But I was more thinking about how, is there any sort of toolkit or anywhere we can look at sustainable living in regards to the economy and finances? Or, you know, I know Susan's on the call now from Thorpe Hall, and she does like a swap shop for school uniform, and we was also talking about it as governors as almost relabelling that as like vintage clothing, where everyone can sort of get involved rather than people of need. You know, it's things like that where they're absolutely free, but it's just kind of a relabelling of what we have, but it feeds into it hits all levels, if you see what I mean. Is there anything else that we can look at that we could change things without using much money?
Yeah, and I think there's such a sort of boom with apps in different clothes selling platforms that I think do appeal to people across sort of all different demographics. I can't think of a resource or a sort of a toolkit off the top of my head, but I'll have a think about it.
Okay.
I mean, it's not closed, but an example, I know Tanya from South Grove's on the school, and they're linked up with a food redistribution hub, but they're labelling it as a French market, and students are making recipes based on ingredients.
That's what I was thinking of. Ideas that doesn't have to be particularly closed, but anything like that. I mean, that's an excellent thing too. You know, it's almost a relabelling of what we have, and suddenly many more people are interested in, because you know that seems a bit more trendy than something else. Do you see what I mean? So yeah, I mean, I'll have a think on that as well, because I think that could be really useful for schools.
100%, and yeah, caring about sustainability is definitely for everybody. Yes, in that framing. I'm going to move on and hand over to our speakers now. I'm really delighted that we've got Zoe, David and Alison all here to talk about their different areas of work. I mean, I'm very excited to have them here because I think all the work they're doing is excellent and really interesting, so I hope you do as well. They have a sort of, as you'll see, wide variety of takes on this, but I think they're all going to touch on really what the benefits to our students and to our communities are of sort of giving our attention to sustainability and climate education. So we'll start with Zoe. Over to you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just getting my slides up. So just to start then, thank you for the introduction, Poppy. My name's Zoe. I come from Teach the Future, which is a student-led organisation focusing on climate education and sustainability education in the UK. And we're supported by Students Organising for Sustainability UK. And hence the name. We're not just focused in England. We have young people working on climate education advocacy in all 4 devolved nations, so not only England, but also Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. And fundamentally, we believe that it's crucial for young people to learn about the climate and ecological crises, one, to make sense of it, but also to help them understand what their place is in it. And that means learning about how they're caused, how the climate and crises are caused, how to mitigate their impacts, and also to develop the skills that are needed to adapt to a changing world and an uncertain future that many young people are going to be going into. So I'm going to mainly be talking about our Track Changes project. This is something that we've recently done in collaboration with SOS UK. But just before I start, I'll say I can't give the project enough justice in this short talk today. It's a lot of work has gone into it. It's been a massive collaborative project that started in May this year. So you can go onto our website and watch a launch webinar recording, which goes into the project in a lot more detail. But just to explain, the Track Changes project brought together climate education sector experts, academics and teachers, most importantly, to look at the national curriculum and how sustainability and its competencies can be woven as a golden thread throughout the national curriculum. It wasn't a plan to drastically overhaul it, but rather to make considered changes and repurpose the existing content, not adding anything new, to basically have sustainability promoted throughout. And we had quite a unique opportunity in that we had these sector experts, so we were able to view the national curriculum from a holistic perspective, and to look at it from a student's perspective of what education they're receiving and how sustainability is kind of threaded throughout the different subjects that they get taught about. We covered, skipped ahead. We covered these 6 topics. They are only focused on Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 because this is mainly the youth age group that we target at Teach the Future, but there's no reason why it couldn't be done for Key Stage 1 and 2 as well. And just to show you what that looks like, we try to keep the documents as familiar as we could. So you'll see that they look very similar to the national curriculum documents for each subject, but we've made changes just to the text on each of the points. We've not added any new subject aims or learning outcomes as such. And as you can see there under the red text, the bits that we've highlighted, it's not just focused on the environmental side. You can see points in there about social sustainability around teaching people about Indigenous cultures in art and design, for example. That's where this example comes from. But as well as looking at the individual changes within the documents, we created 10 guiding principles around sustainability within the curriculum. And these were grouped into 3 different sections, so linking thinking towards positive futures and transformative learning. And these essentially highlight the different benefits that we can receive, that students receive and the wider school community receives by making these changes to the curriculum. So the linking thinking is really about understanding sustainability as an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary subject. So educating young people through weaving sustainability, competence as a golden thread, really as a sort of remedial approach to things like eco-anxiety. Often eco-anxiety is used as a bit of an excuse to perhaps not engage with young people on the subject because they're worried about how it will affect their mental health. But actually, if we are embedding sustainability into the curricula to start off with, it kind of mitigates that in the first place. Mental health doesn't have to, eco-anxiety and climate change doesn't have to be a mental health problem if young people are equipped from an early age, not just taught about it, but also empowered to be part of the solution as well. So taking action, no matter how small, can really kind of help with that feeling of helplessness that young people are often feeling kind of in this sphere, especially when they're expected to kind of be the ones leading us out of this crisis, if you like. Also, sustainability helps young people to connect up subjects and draw links between what they're taught about and different facets of their education. But it also helps them to think content-wise about links between people in other parts of the world, to link up geographies and to link up temporal scales as well. So it gives people, young people, a holistic understanding of how their actions that they do now will impact people in the future, but also to understand that there are connections between humans in different parts of the world and how they're experiencing climate change, and also between living and non-living things. So really kind of introducing that idea of nature connectedness as well. Also, sustainability offers opportunities in other areas of learning and development. Competencies associated with sustainability, such as critical thinking and systems thinking, are actually really important skills to have in a competitive employment market as well. And this learning is not only transformative to the individual, but also transformative to the location and setting in which the learning takes place. So it's really starting to think of the school as being embedded in its local community, and how teaching young people and engaging them with subjects of sustainability can impact that wider community by linking up real life projects with what students are learning in school, and how that can benefit parents and also wider communities and also essentially the world as these young people go off into their different careers. So that's a bit about the Track Changes project. As I said, I've not given it as much justice as it deserves. So please do take a look at our website and you can see the 6 different Track Changes documents for each subject area on there, and also look at the webinar to learn a bit more about why we did this. Obviously, come from the young person's perspective, it was a sort of a misalignment and lack of what we felt should be in curriculum and what young people should be equipped with isn't there at the moment, but also largely kind of driven by teacher demands as well to have more subject content that focuses on climate change and sustainability. So please do take a look at those resources, and I'm happy to take questions I think at the end of the speaker session. So thank you very much.
Yes, thanks ever so much, Zoe. Yeah, we'll do questions at the end of the speakers, but also feel free to pop them in the chat as we go along if you want. I think that's really inspiring, and I will share those links. And I'll confess I haven't looked at your guiding principles properly, so I'll be interested to compare how they sort of align or don't with the guiding principles that we've got in the charter document. Right, I'll hand straight over to David. You can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Poppy, and thank you for the invite to this this launch, because I think a lot of the things which Waltham Forest are developing sort of certainly chime in with what I'm trying to develop as well in terms of leadership for sustainability. So I'll just try and put my slides up for you. Which don't appear to, oh, yeah.
David frozen. Someone give me a sign if they can hear David.
No, David's it's frozen.
Yeah, just check it's not on my end. Okay. Give it a moment, otherwise we could hop on to Alison and go back. David, I don't know if you can hear me. I can try sharing your slides. I think we've lost David entirely. So, Alison, do you mind jumping in now?
No, that's fine, Poppy. Just as you said my name, the lights went off in this room and I can't get them back on. So I'm sorry if I've been plunged into darkness on the screen. But anyway, thanks very much for inviting me. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, okay, good. And I just wanted to start by saying what a fantastic document that is, Poppy, and I just think that you're really lucky, all you teachers, to be in Waltham Forest, and I just wish all London boroughs would do exactly this. It's a fantastic resource. I won't say too much, but I just wanted to say a little bit about the organisation that I'm working for. So I work at UCL, and we've just launched a Centre for Climate Change and Sustainability Education. We launched in April, so we're still pretty new. And the aim of the centre is to provide all teachers of all subjects and of all age ranges support in embedding issues of climate change, of biodiversity loss, of Anthropocene, sustainability, so all aspects really of the environmental crisis into their teaching in appropriate and sensitive ways. And it will be research informed, and as I say, it will be free, and it will be very flexible to engage with. And I'll say a little bit more about specifically what we're doing and which subjects we're piloting this year in a moment. part of the research, I'm going to be really cheeky, Poppy, and I'm going to just shamelessly publicise our survey, because we've done 2 pieces of research so far. One is we've done some case study work with schools across England, which I can share some very brief headlines, and the other is we've launched a national survey for all teachers, and I'm going to put the link in the chat. And if you are bored by my voice in the next 5 minutes, please do the survey instead, because we really want lots of people to engage with that. Secondary and primary, any subject, senior leaders as well. Please, it'll take about 10 to 15 minutes, and we're going to use that to shape the professional development that we provide for teachers. The case study work we did last summer term, which unfortunately we only had enough money to do it at secondary, but we're hoping to roll out to primary this year. I just wanted to share a few headlines from that, because we went into 10 really different schools with really in different parts of the country, with very different kind of catchments and so on. And what we found was a really broad spectrum of school engagement with these issues. And some of the characteristics of engagement, I'm sure you could predict, but the most engaged schools had these issues embedded in their school improvement plan. They had a school leadership that was not just supportive, but actually proactive. And often key people in the school included curriculum leads, but also people like the finance officer and the site manager and so on. It was a really kind of holistic sense of the school pulling together to really think about how to respond to the issues and the challenges of the climate crisis. The moderately engaged schools often had, and this may be familiar to many of you in this virtual room, often had 1 or 2 incredibly committed individuals who were making a real difference around, you know, a number of initiatives, but it was rather dependent on that person, and if that person left the school, our sense was that a lot of the impetus would be lost. In those schools, the senior leadership team were supportive, but not necessarily proactive. And it does seem to us as a centre that it shouldn't just be kind of down to serendipity as to whether you as a student go to a school that happens to have that committed individual or happens to have that school leadership team who's really proactive. And then on the very less engaged end of the spectrum, what we found were schools that wanted to do more, but were just facing too many challenges on too many fronts. Whether that be related to COVID or to Ofsted or whatever it was. But we didn't go in any school that was saying this isn't something we should care about, which was good. I won't say any of that because I'm going to run out of time. But what I did want to say, the last thing about this case study research was that in every single school we went into, we found young people who were incredibly galvanised. But in some cases, kids who were really disappointed with what they were getting in school. And I've got to tell you one quotation, which is a bit heart-wrenching, really. There was one student who said, "I've never been told there's anything I can do about it," which is really sad. And in the same school, interestingly, the head teacher said to us that there's no pressure from our young people to do anything, which sort of made me wonder what the mechanisms for students to, you know, make their feelings known existed in the school. So a wide spectrum for all kinds of reasons. You know, that's part of the research that's going to shape what we're doing. So really quickly then, what are we doing this year? Specifically, we're piloting resources for history teachers and geography teachers across primary and secondary schools. We're actually writing those right now. It looks like there's going to be for any particular teacher, there'll be something like 3 90-minute online modules. And they will be delivered online, and we hope to provide some networking opportunities around those. Next year we will expand that out to other subjects, and in the long term we want all subjects there, and we're drawing on expertise across UCL, which is fantastic. So we're making sure that everything is up to date in terms of academic work, and it really, and I'll just end with this, the reason that we're offering it across all subjects is that we truly believe this is an interdisciplinary issue. And, you know, I noticed in the charter that there's some encouragement for teachers to work together across subjects, which is great. And we really do think that each subject has something very distinctive to bring to this. Some subjects might focus on the sustainability side more, you know, perhaps more than the Anthropocene climate change side, but every subject has something very distinctive to offer. And that's what we're really interested in supporting. I'll stop there, Poppy. Oh yes, and sorry, can I say one very last thing? I'll put a link to the web page, and if you want to sign up to get updates from us and so on, please do.
Great, thanks ever so much for that, Alison. Clearly a lot going on to share there. You're already getting questions about how do we get involved in pilot schools. So maybe share your email address as well. I'm also happy to be a bit of a conduit between the centre and some schools, because it'd be wonderful to see how sort of the implementation of the charter sort of guidelines maybe help sort of demonstrate the impacts that they're having. Don't think David has managed to reappear. I haven't checked my mobile phone, but what I suggest is, has anyone got questions at the moment for Zoe and Alison? And I'm going to continue to try and get hold of David. I've got his slides, but I don't think I could do them justice.
I think there were a couple of like quite specific questions in the chat. I think the first one was to Zoe about aversion for primary school, about whether that's something that's on the cards.
Yeah, with the Track Changes project at the moment, we are currently in a phase of disseminating it as far as wide as we can. There have been talks about looking at Key Stage 1 and 2 as well. I can't give you a sort of timeline for that at the moment. It's all based on volunteer work, so we have quite a few other projects as well, but it's certainly something that we're interested in looking at. And you can, the Teach the Future website, we release blogs quite often, and we have social media platforms as well which you can keep track of. But yeah, hopefully, but I can't give you any dates on it.
And I think the other sort of questions were specifically to Alison about sort of getting involved with the project and about being pilot schools. But as Poppy mentioned, maybe that can be pop your email addresses in the chat and sort of take it from there. Yeah, so just a quick introduction. I'm Emily. I've been working with Poppy on the Climate Charter, one of the other climate outreach coordinators. So I've got sort of a couple of questions prepared, but if anyone has any questions that they want to ask either of the speakers or to Poppy and myself about the charter, feel free to just raise your hand, or you can just pop them in the chat and I can get to them. And it can be sort of specifically related to what we've been talking about, or sort of more broad questions. So the first question, which I'll ask either Zoe or Alison can take first. If there was one policy change that you could implement, or one action that you think everyone should take, what would it be, sort of in the climate education sphere?
I don't mind jumping in.
Yeah, go for it. Thanks, Alison.
So what could, sorry, Emily, was it what could all schools do? What could any school do?
Yeah, so yes, if it was like sort of one policy change that could be implemented, or one sort of action that schools could take, you know, your sort of top line priority that you think would really make a big impact.
I mean, I think having schools having a designated lead person who is given, dare I say it, a bit of time to do it would be fantastic. So that, I think that would be my number one. If I can squeeze in another one, I'd say get it embedded in the school improvement plan.
Thanks, Alison. Yeah, I think there's definitely resonates with some things that we've been sort of thinking about and put in the charter as well as sort of priorities there. Yeah, Zoe, we put you on the spot with that question.
This is a challenge.
Yeah.
I think, coming from a young person's perspective, I think just having a conversation with children, and I think, as Alison was saying, there was you know, with not being aware of this is something that actually children are and young people are really engaged with and want to know more about, and I think providing that sort of open and honest space for young people to be able to talk about that and understand what they want to. I'm talking largely perhaps from a curriculum point of view, maybe more than sort of an operational perspective, but yeah, I think including young people as part of that is really important. And you know, the Climate Charter has that section for learners, so I think that would be mine.
Yeah, and you've actually sort of answered another question that I was going to ask about those sort of practical ways that we really do include young people's voices in some of these discussions. And I guess, yeah, it's just starting those conversations is definitely one key way. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other sort of more, I guess, practical ways that you feel like those that young people's voices need to be included in the discussions.
I think having an eco council is really important, but I think we kind of can't lose sight, and certainly the Climate Charter doesn't, of this whole kind of school approach, and making sure that it's not just something that sticks to the eco council and it's not just those few students that every few years that are included. I think finding a way to bring the whole school into it and look at it kind of holistically is a really important thing to do.
Before I go ahead with any more of my questions, just to open it up again, if anyone's got any questions or any comments that they'd like to make, or something that sort of resonated that we've spoken about, that you'd like to sort of share with the rest of the group. Yeah, one question. Sorry, I'm just catching up with the chat as well. I think there's a few emails in there, but so one question there from Yassim. Have any of the teachers encountered any pushbacks from climate skeptic parents? And even if they haven't, any advice if this scenario arises? Alison, if that's, yeah.
Yeah, shall I jump in? I mean, I've not heard of any pushback. What I have heard of is pushback in another direction of parents saying, you know, why are you booking so many foreign trips and flying, or, you know, so I've heard of that. I've not actually heard of any pushback. That's not to say it doesn't happen, but I'm not aware of it myself. Oh, David's back with us, so he may have something else to say on that.
I didn't realise I'd frozen out, so I don't know how much you got or not from my presentation. Not a lot, I suspect. Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, David. Yeah, we lost you just as it started. So we've gone to some questions, but I think maybe if we finish off this question, then we could go back to your presentation. Although I think I've got a bit of an echo here.
I mean, I'd probably pass the question on to David, which is a bit difficult because he's just arrived. But David, are you aware of ever sort of climate skeptic parents pushing back on actions that schools are taken? Is that something you've ever come across?
Not parents, no, but I mean, I have more climate skeptic school improvement people who tend to think that if you're taking your eye off the ball, if you're doing some of these things which they don't recognise as being school improvement. So my challenge has always been to convince school improvement people of whatever description, some local authorities, some outside people coming in, and including Ofsted inspectors actually, to say, well, no, this isn't just an add-on. This is part of our school improvement strategy. It's enriching our curriculum. It's motivating our pupils. It's helping our community. You know, what's not to like? So I think I do come across quite a lot of obtuseness really, and a lack of linked thinking in terms of school improvement and sustainability agenda.
Thanks, David. You came in just at the right time to answer that question. But we can go back to your presentation now. I think Poppy said she could share the slides.
Yeah, perhaps if I share the slides and you just ask me to move along.
Right. Okay. That sounds a better idea. So I'm in your hands then, Poppy. Are you able to do that? Are you okay to do that then, Poppy? Sorry. Yeah. Right, as I was saying then, I think, yes, senior leaders, this is what I have concentrated on since becoming a head or relinquishing headship a few years ago. I've concentrated on trying to convince school leaders to embed sustainability as part of school improvement and not just see it as an add-on, as I was saying, because school leaders in reality are the gatekeepers, and if they're not on board, then you might have enthusiastic members of staff, you might have enthusiastic pupils, but you're not going to embed sustainability. So if we click on, please, Polly. Yeah. And so really captaincy is the key. It's leadership, but the captaincy I'm talking about is more like a ship's captain. It's a leader that will sail the ship rather than drive it, if you see what I mean. And a lot of school improvement is about driving improvement, which is okay, but it's quite an industrial concept. I'm talking about more of a generative, subtle and distributed type of leadership, which is, I think, summed up by a captaincy approach to embedding sustainability. Next slide, please. And I asked the question, and it may be a bit harsh, but are too many leaders in schools as well as elsewhere boiled frogs in terms of going along with the present system rather than wishing to be part of the change? Because we know the present system is damaging the planet. Well, what can we do about it? And what can we do differently? And the question is, are schools part of that nasty system, or are they part of the solution? So I challenge leaders really to be a little bit more nuanced and, well, radical in some ways in order to introduce sustainability in a more profound way, so that they are actually making a difference locally and then extending that globally. Next slide, please. And I argue that schools should really be part of the circular economy, and they can be in microcosm, and be an exemplar for this in the way they operate, but also in the way that the leaders operate, in terms of being generative, using systems thinking rather than always looking for silver bullet solutions. Silver bullet solutions have their place, but often it's a joined up thinking that makes for successful leadership. So if the operations of the school are low waste or zero waste, and all the other aspects of the school operations are sustainable in their own right, then those messages can help the curriculum, and the children can be part of that. It can be a dynamic curriculum, and it can also influence the community as well. And I'll give an example of that a bit later. And it's really a permaculture perspective, and people think of permaculture as being just growing plants, horticulture, but it isn't. It's more than that. It's about social justice. It's about fair shares for all, and it's about a better life, really, better work-life balance, and a better quality of life. It's not about sackcloth and ashes, which is sometimes what eco things are always associated with. The next slide, please. So the model I have, and it corresponds very much to Waltham Forest model, and it's nothing new really, is that if you look at sustainability from not just the green perspective, but the social perspective and the economics perspective, and schools operate within this in terms of a sustainability agenda through their curriculum, their campus, and their influence on the community, and the sort of leadership that you need for that, then there are big wins for everyone concerned. You have happier children, happier teachers, a more enriched community, and really, who's to argue with it? But as I say, you do have to argue your case if you're dealing with more hard-nosed, target-based people who want to know what the numbers are. So, but it's not all about numbers, but you can deliver the numbers as well if you need to. So it's about this creating a generative culture. I think the Waltham Forest model shows that it's a cultural change as much as a technical change or other types of change which you associate with sustainability. Someone once said that often it's technical solutions are seen as the 80% of what you need to do, with 20% social solutions, and really you should reverse that. It's more of an 80% cultural change with a 20% technical change. But more of that in the book. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So just the back one, please. Whoops. Yeah, previous slide, please. Yeah, so the curriculum enrichment possibilities are great, as I was saying. One example from my school in Woolwich was that we installed solar panels through a partnership with a solar cooperative, not-for-profit community company, and we taught the children about how the solar panels operated. This was within their science curriculum, and they learnt about fossil fuels and about electricity generation and all the rest of it. But with that knowledge, they could then suggest ways in which we could reduce the energy consumption of school. Through the site manager, they learned how the energy was being used to create the heat for the buildings, etc. But then they could also take that knowledge home and use their Pesta power to help their parents reduce their energy at home, and that helped to address fuel poverty, which in our case in Woolwich, many parents suffered from. And of course now it's even more of an issue. So you can have big wins with the curriculum, the agency of the children, and also helping your local community. Next slide, please. So the most important C word of all, which I think is courage. We need leaders of courage who will actually put their heads above the parapet and implement sustainability in a profound way, rather than outsourcing it to a junior member of staff. And I think if leaders take on board the Waltham Forest framework, really embrace it wholeheartedly, then I think the sky's the limit, really. The sky's the limit for school improvement, and also for a localized initiative base for literally helping to save the planet. And I think it helps us all to take responsibility rather than waiting for techno fixes to come along and bail us out. We can wait a long time for those. We can wait a long time for big government. I think it's a localized approach that schools can help to drive, to coin a phrase, that can really make a big difference. And this is what I advocate. So last slide, please. Yeah, so I'm saying to school leaders, don't be a barrier, be an enabler, because sustainability can be a drive for school improvement and save the planet. And all this is sort of argued in much more detail, obviously, in the book which came out earlier. And I'm not here to plug a book. I'm here to sort of advocate for leadership for sustainability, and it's sort of my passion, my mission, really, to get more school leaders to take this on board big time, so that we can hopefully do our utmost to alleviate the problems that we all face in society. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks very much for that, David. And I realised, because we sort of jumped straight into it, you didn't actually really introduce yourself.
Yes, sorry.
People should now go and discover your website for your credentials. Are there more questions, David, or for anybody else? And yes, we'll put a link to David's book in the chat, Tanya.
Anyway, I've got the grey hairs to prove that I've walked the talk, shall we say? And I hope I haven't sort of bludgeoned you into submission, so apologies for that.
There was, sorry, Zoe, you popped your hand up. There was just one other question in the chat that we could go to afterwards, but yeah, go for it, Zoe.
Sorry, I just had some time to reflect on the question you asked about practical ways of amplifying youth voice. I think I don't think you do have to do it different as such, because I was thinking of an example of a school that I spoke to where I think it was Key Stage 1 or 2, I can't remember which one, but they did a homework example. They had to write a letter to somebody about something to do with plastics, more or less, and a lot of people wrote to David Attenborough, or they wrote to the Prime Minister, and there was a couple of students that wrote to the head teacher of the school to talk about why is the plastic on the front of our school planners. That doesn't need to be there. And then that ended up leading to a practical action, and it wasn't intended to be an opportunity for young people to, but that kind of naturally, organically came out of that homework study that they had. So I think there's no, you don't have to change. I think it's important to create spaces as a separate thing for young people to talk about that, but I think also it can come through what you're already doing as well, and those kind of gold nuggets kind of appear through those sort of actions. But yeah.
I think that's right, Zoe, and I really related to what you were saying about you don't have to change the curriculum radically, but you can insert or have sustainability as a like you said, a golden thread that runs through it, without throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And that's why, and this is what some people think. Some people are saying, well, you must throw out the curriculum as it stands, so we have a better curriculum. But this is where school leaders can really take a lead, literally, because they've got discretion, and they can enable people to adapt the curriculum as it stands in order to embed sustainability and make it all the better for that. So it doesn't have to be one extreme or the other.
So one final question for everyone before we wrap up, because I think we've only got a few minutes left, and this can be for everyone. So if you just want to pop your responses in the chat, or maybe we'll hear a short response from each of the speakers as well. So this is borrowed from Rob Hopkins' podcast, who started Transition Town, who always starts the podcast with a sort of visioning exercise. So imagining that it's 2030, what's your vision for climate education and sustainability? What's been achieved? What does your school look like? Sort of what's something that you think would be a great success to have reached by 2030? So yeah, feel free to pop your responses in the chat, and I'll just go around to each of the speakers and take a short answer, and then we'll then Poppy will wrap up. Yeah, Alison, do you want to start?
Wow, so much I could say. Let's keep it at one thing then from me, which is I'd really would like it if young people in all their lessons look at the world through with an environmental lens. As one of the lenses. There are other lenses, but whatever subject, whether it's history or English or art or whatever it is, just to look at that subject through an environmental lens.
And David?
Well, I mean, education is the main sort of transmission of our culture, and I'd like to think that by that point, we wouldn't be labelling it climate change education. It would just be education. In the same way that you wouldn't have to have Black History Month, because it would just be history. It would be ordinary history as we would deliver it, and there wouldn't need to be these extra labels or qualifications to it. So and it would just be part of a good education, so that we can deliver the new economy and culture that we need for survival, really, rather than continuing to stoke the old ways that are sending us to hell in a handcart.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Zoe, final.
I don't quite know how I follow both of those, but yeah, I think at the moment climate change is still very siloed as a topic in subjects at school, and I think for 2030 it's kind of going beyond this traditional idea of what we think of climate change and going towards sustainability and having students that come out of education having this kind of holistic worldview of how kind of sustainability, which includes social economics, climate change, kind of all interconnects, and then take that into whatever they go on to do after school, and it's all our problems are solved.
Thanks everyone. Very hard to narrow it down to one short thing in such a short space of time, but yeah, no, that's some really good closing thoughts. I'll pass back to Poppy to sort of wrap us up.
Thanks very much, Emily, and to everyone that's contributed today. If you have got more ideas of the aspirations to 2030, please do share them. Or if something occurs to you and you're cycling or home or on the tube later this evening, do put it in an email to me, because this is the sort of thing that I think will really help motivate us and move us towards that positive future. We need those visions, and young people need those visions as well, otherwise they don't know what they're working towards. I've put my email in the chat. Please do contact me if you've got any questions, if you started to look through the charter and thinking, which way up does this go, where do I start? Yeah, myself and Emily are really keen to be part of this journey with schools as you develop your action plan, and I hope to see some of you at the screening of 2040 on Wednesday. That is an in-person event. We will meet in real life, and it'd be really nice to meet more of you. So yeah, I'm going to stick around now for a few minutes anyway if people have got questions, but otherwise Thanks very much to all our speakers. Thank you, Lauren, for your introduction, and yeah, enjoy getting to grips with the Climate Action Plan. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Zoe, Alison and David, for the very interesting speeches. And can I just say, because I'm going to add a little bit, you'll know I'm quite competitive, everybody. I have an aspiration that by 2030 that we're at the forefront nationally around what we're doing in our schools, and we see that evident prior to 2030 in lots of fantastic inspection comments, because we've blown Ofsted's socks off. I think what we've got here is we've got some fantastic resources and some great thought leadership about how we move this forward and really take it to another level, and taking David's challenge about how do we make this our cultural norm in Waltham Forest. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.